My own son pushed my wife and me off a cliff to silence us forever. As I lay bleeding on the rocks below, my wife whispered through her broken ribs, "Don't move. Pretend you're dead." But what she revealed after they left was more terrifying than the fall itself. My name is Chester Edwards, and I'm 59 years old. 3 days ago, I thought I had the perfect family. I lived in Cedar Falls, Colorado, a small mountain town where everyone knows everyone, and secrets are supposed to stay buried under the weight of fresh snow and old traditions. I had built a successful construction business from nothing, raised a son I was proud of, and after 32 years of marriage, I still looked forward to coming home to Margaret every evening. That was before I discovered what my son Michael and his wife Jessica were really capable of. Let me take you back to last Tuesday morning. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the promise of an early winter. Margaret was in the kitchen making her famous apple cinnamon pancakes, the same recipe her grandmother brought from Iowa back in 1952. The kitchen was warm and golden, filled with the sounds I'd grown to love, the sizzle of batter hitting the griddle, the gentle hum of the coffee maker, and Margaret humming an old Johnny Cash song under her breath. "Chester, honey, could you call Michael? Tell him breakfast is almost ready," she said, not looking up from the stove. Her silver hair was pulled back in a loose bun, and she was wearing that faded blue apron I'd bought her for our 20th anniversary. I should have known something was wrong when Michael answered on the first ring. My 34-year-old son, who usually took 3 tries to answer his phone because he was always busy with something important, picked up immediately. "Dad." "Perfect timing. Jessica and I were just talking about you and Mom." There was something in his voice, a tension I couldn't quite place. In all his years, Michael had never been one to hide his feelings. As a kid, you could read his emotions like an open book. Happy, sad, angry, excited. It was all right there on his face and in his voice. But lately, something had changed. Your mother's making pancakes. "You two want to come over for breakfast?" "Actually, Dad, we were hoping you and Mom might want to take a little drive with us today. Up to Eagle Point. Jessica's been wanting to see the fall colors from up there, and you know how much Mom loves those mountain views. Eagle Point, the highest accessible point in our area, about 45 minutes up a winding mountain road. Margaret and I had been there countless times over the years, for picnics, to watch sunsets, to show visitors the breathtaking view of the valley below. It was our special place. That sounds lovely, son. Your mother would love that. What time were you thinking?" "How about in an hour? We'll pick you up. No need for you to drive. I know you've been having trouble with that old truck of yours." That was odd. My truck ran perfectly fine, and Michael knew it. I'd just had it serviced the week before. But I didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe Jessica had suggested he drive. She was always particular about things like that. When I told Margaret about the plan, her face lit up like a Christmas morning. "Oh, Chester, that's wonderful. It's been too long since we've all done something together as a family. And the aspens should be perfect right now, all gold and orange." She was right. We hadn't spent quality time together as a family in months. Ever since Michael married Jessica 2 years ago, our relationship had become strained, not hostile exactly, but distant, formal, like we were acquaintances rather than family. Jessica was from Denver, came from money, the kind of old Colorado money that traces back to silver mining and railroad fortunes. She was beautiful in a sharp, calculated way, with platinum blonde hair that never had a strand out of place and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She worked in real estate, specialized in high-end mountain properties, and made more money in a month than I used to make in a year when I started my construction business. Margaret always tried to give Jessica the benefit of the doubt. "She's just different from us, honey. Big city girl, used to a different way of life. She'll warm up once she gets to know us better." But 2 years had passed, and Jessica still treated us like we were something she'd rather scrape off her designer boots. An hour later, Michael's black BMW pulled into our driveway. Through the living room window, I watched him get out. My boy, who used to help me build birdhouses in the garage and throw a football in the backyard until it was too dark to see. He was tall like me, but leaner, with dark hair that he kept perfectly styled and clothes that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. Jessica stayed in the passenger seat, checking something on her phone. She was wearing what looked like expensive hiking gear, the kind of outfit that cost more than most people's rent but would never see an actual trail. "They're here." "Sweetheart," I called to Margaret, who was rushing around collecting her jacket and purse. "Coming! I just want to grab my camera." The light should be beautiful up there this time of day. Margaret was always taking pictures. She had dozens of photo albums chronicling our life together, our travels, Michael growing up. Photography was her way of holding on to the good moments, making them permanent. Michael knocked on the door. 3 sharp, impatient raps. When I opened it, he was smiling, but it was the same smile I'd seen him use with difficult clients at work, professional, practiced. "Ready for an adventure, Dad? Ready as we'll ever be." "Your mother's just getting her camera." "Great, Jessica's really excited about this." He glanced back toward the car where Jessica was still absorbed in her phone. "She's been researching the area, learning about the local history and everything. That was news to me. In the 2 years I'd known Jessica, she'd never shown the slightest interest in local history or anything else about Cedar Falls. She usually spent family gatherings checking her phone and making subtle comments about how quaint everything was. Margaret appeared at my shoulder, beaming. "Michael!" This is such a lovely surprise. "It feels like forever since we've all done something together." She stepped forward to hug him, and I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt? Regret? It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Hi, Mom. You look great. Ready to see some incredible views?" "I can't wait. I brought my camera and even packed some of those oatmeal cookies you used to love as a boy." For just a moment, Michael's smile became real. "You didn't have to do that, Mom. A mother never stops taking care of her children, honey, no matter how old they get." The drive started pleasantly enough. Jessica had actually gotten out of the front seat to let Margaret sit up there with Michael, which was more courtesy than I'd seen from her in months. Margaret chatted excitedly about the changing leaves, pointing out landmarks and sharing memories from previous trips to Eagle Point. "Remember when you were 12, Michael, and you insisted on hiking all the way to the old mining camp ruins? Your father and I thought we'd lost you when you disappeared into those trees." Michael glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "I remember. You and Dad were so worried. But I just wanted to explore, see what was out there. You always were curious about everything, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked." Margaret reached over and patted his arm affectionately. "I loved that about you." In the back seat, I caught Jessica rolling her eyes. She was still holding her phone, thumb moving constantly across the screen. Texting someone, probably. Jessica was always texting someone. As we climbed higher into the mountains, the aspen trees formed a tunnel of gold around the winding road. It was breathtaking, the kind of beauty that made you understand why people fell in love with Colorado and never wanted to leave. Margaret had her camera out taking pictures through the window. "Oh, Chester, look at that. The way the light is hitting those trees, it's like they're on fire." I squeezed her hand. After 32 years of marriage, her enthusiasm for simple beauty still made my heart skip. Margaret saw magic in everyday moments, found wonder in sunsets and snowflakes, and the way morning light streamed through our kitchen window. "It's beautiful, honey. Just like you." She blushed like a teenager. "Oh, stop it, you old charmer." In the front seat, Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The road to Eagle Point was familiar, but I noticed Michael was taking some turns I didn't recognize. When I mentioned it, he said they'd improved the road, made it more scenic. Jessica nodded in agreement, finally looking up from her phone. The new route is supposed to be much better. More viewpoints, less traffic. That should have been my first real warning. Jessica never knew anything about road improvements or local changes. She barely acknowledged that Cedar Falls existed most of the time. We pulled into what looked like a parking area, though it wasn't the usual spot for Eagle Point. This area was more remote, more isolated. The trees pressed in close on all sides, and I couldn't see any other cars or people. "This doesn't look like the regular Eagle Point parking," I said. "They moved it," Michael replied quickly. "Environmental concerns about the old location. This is the new access point." He seemed nervous, checking his watch and glancing at Jessica. She had put her phone away and was looking around with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Come on," Jessica said, getting out of the car. "The view is just a short walk from here." Margaret was already out, camera in hand, breathing deeply. "Oh, the air is so fresh up here. And listen, you can hear the wind in the aspens. Sounds like whispers. I've lived in Colorado my whole life, spent countless hours in these mountains, and I'd never heard Margaret make that observation before. The wind did sound like whispers. Urgent warning whispers. Michael locked the car and started walking ahead of us. The path is just through those trees. It's a bit of a scramble, but the view is worth it. Jessica fell into step beside him, and I noticed they seemed to know exactly where they were going. No hesitation, no checking for trail markers or looking around to get their bearings. Margaret and I followed, holding hands as we picked our way over rocks and around fallen logs. The path, if it could be called that, was rough and overgrown. Definitely not maintained by the Parks Department. "Michael, are you sure this is the right way?" Margaret called ahead. "It doesn't seem like there's been much foot traffic here. Trust me, Mom. I've been here before. Just a little further, that stopped me cold." When had Michael been here before? And why hadn't he mentioned it? In a town like Cedar Falls, any new scenic spot would be common knowledge within a week. We emerged from the trees onto a rocky outcropping. The view was spectacular. You could see the entire valley spread out below, the town of Cedar Falls looking like a toy village in the distance. But something was wrong. This wasn't Eagle Point. I'd been to Eagle Point dozens of times, and this wasn't it. "Michael, where exactly are we?" He and Jessica exchanged a look, quick, but I caught it. There was something in that look that made my blood run cold. "Dad, Mom, there's something we need to talk to you about." Margaret was at the edge of the outcropping taking pictures. "Oh, Michael, this view is incredible. How did you find this place?" "Mom, could you step back from there, please? We need to have a family discussion." There was something in his tone that made Margaret lower her camera and look at him with concern. "Is everything all right, honey? You sound so serious." Jessica stepped closer to Michael, and I noticed she was wearing expensive hiking boots with serious tread. Not the kind of boots you wear for casual mountain sightseeing. The kind you wear when you need sure footing on dangerous terrain. "The thing is," Michael continued, his voice taking on a strange, flat quality, "you two have become a problem." "A problem?" I repeated. "What kind of problem?" Margaret moved away from the edge, closer to me. I could feel her confusion and growing alarm. "The business, Dad. Your construction business. And the land it sits on." I stared at my son. "What about it?" "It's worth a lot of money. More than you realize. Jessica's done some research, had some appraisals done. The land alone is worth nearly $2 million. My mouth went dry. $2 million? That's impossible. It's just 5 acres with some old buildings. Jessica spoke for the first time since we'd gotten out of the car. Not anymore. The town council approved a zoning change last month. Mixed-use development. Your property is now prime real estate for a shopping complex. Margaret grabbed my arm. "Chester, what are they talking about?" I was trying to process what I was hearing. "Even if that's true, what does it have to do with us being a problem?" Michael ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "You're not going to sell, are you, Dad? You've said it 100 times. This business is my legacy. I'll never sell." It is my legacy. I built it from nothing. Your grandfather would roll over in his grave if grandfather's dead, Dad, and so is sentiment. That land represents our future. Jessica's pregnant, Margaret gasped with delight. Pregnant? Oh, Michael, that's wonderful. When? How far along? Why didn't you tell us sooner? But Jessica's face remained cold, calculating. We need money for the future we want. Private schools, the right neighborhood, college funds. The pieces were starting to fall into place, forming a picture so ugly I didn't want to see it clearly. So you want me to sell the business? We need you to sell the business, Michael corrected. But we know you won't. You're too stubborn, too attached to the past. Margaret was looking back and forth between us, trying to understand. I don't follow. If Chester doesn't want to sell, then he doesn't sell. It's his business, his decision, Jessica laughed, a sound like breaking glass. That's where you're wrong, Margaret. See, we've been thinking about this for months, planning, and we realized that if something happened to both of you, an accident, maybe, then Michael would inherit everything. The words hit me like a physical blow. I took a step backward, pulling Margaret with me. What did you just say? Michael wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Make what harder? Margaret's voice was rising in panic. Michael, what is she talking about? That's when I saw Jessica nod to Michael. Some kind of signal. They moved fast, faster than I would have thought possible. Jessica grabbed Margaret's arms from behind, while Michael lunged at me. For a moment I was too shocked to react. This was my son, my boy. The child I'd taught to ride a bike and throw a curveball and change a tire. But when I felt his hands on my chest, pushing me toward the edge of the cliff, survival instinct kicked in. Margaret, I shouted, trying to break free from Michael's grip. She was struggling against Jessica, her camera falling and shattering on the rocks. Chester! Michael, stop! What are you doing? I'm sorry, Mom, Michael said, but he didn't sound sorry. He sounded determined. I'm really sorry. And then they pushed us. The fall seemed to last forever and no time at all. I remember the sensation of weightlessness, the rush of wind, Margaret's scream mixing with my own. I remember thinking with crystal clarity that this couldn't be happening. Sons don't murder their parents. Not in real life. Not my son. The impact drove the air from my lungs and sent lightning bolts of pain through every nerve in my body. I hit a ledge about 30 feet down, not the bottom of the cliff, but far enough to do serious damage. Margaret landed a few feet away, her body unnaturally twisted. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world was spinning, and there was blood in my eyes, blood in my mouth, blood pooling beneath my head. Above us I could hear voices. Are they dead? Jessica's voice, businesslike and calm. I can't tell from here. Michael sounded shaken now, like he was just realizing what they'd done. We need to be sure. Jessica, I can't look. Fine, I'll do it. I heard footsteps, the sound of loose rocks falling as Jessica picked her way down toward us. Margaret was lying so still, so terrifyingly still. Blood was seeping from a gash on her forehead, and her left arm was bent at an impossible angle, but her eyes were open. And when she saw me looking at her, she pressed a finger to her lips and mouthed a single word. Still. I understood. Be still. Play dead. Jessica's boots appeared in my peripheral vision. She was standing about 10 feet away, studying us like specimens in a lab. Michael! She called up. I think they're both dead. There's a lot of blood and neither of them is moving. Are you sure? Sure enough. We need to get out of here before someone comes looking for them. Shouldn't we? I don't know. Check for pulses or something? Do you want to get close enough to do that? Because I sure as hell don't. Look at all that blood. And the way her arm is twisted. Nobody survives a fall like that. Margaret's eyes were closed now, her breathing so shallow I could barely see her chest moving. She was doing an incredible job of playing dead. But I didn't know how badly she was really hurt. Jessica climbed back up, and I heard their voices getting fainter as they moved away from the edge. When will people start looking for them? Jessica was asking. Probably not until tonight. Maybe tomorrow morning. Dad doesn't have any jobs scheduled today, and Mom doesn't have any plans I know of. Good. That gives us time to establish our alibi. We drove them up here for sightseeing, left them at Eagle Point, and went back to town. When they didn't come home, we got worried and called the police. What if someone saw us on the road? Saw us all together? So what? We were having a nice family outing. Nobody's going to suspect anything. It'll look like a tragic accident. Two elderly people got too close to the edge, maybe tried to take a picture, and fell. Their voices faded completely as they walked back toward the car. A few minutes later, I heard the BMW start up and drive away. We were alone on the side of a mountain, broken and bleeding, left for dead by my own son. Margaret's eyes opened again, and she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not just pain, though there was plenty of that. It was something darker, something that scared me more than the fall, more than the betrayal, more than the very real possibility that we might die on this mountain. "Chester," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "There's something I need to tell you. Something about Michael. About why they really did this. Margaret, don't try to talk. We need to save your strength. Someone will come looking for us." "No." Her voice was firm despite its weakness. "You need to hear this now, in case we don't make it. What I'm about to tell you changes everything you thought you knew about our son." She paused, gathering strength, and when she spoke again, her words shattered what was left of my world. "Michael isn't your biological son, Chester. And he's known." If you're as shocked as I was by what just happened, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, this story gets even more unbelievable from here. The words hung in the mountain air like poison. Michael isn't your biological son. The physical pain from the fall suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the agony tearing through my chest. What do you mean?" I managed to whisper, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Margaret's face was pale, blood still trickling from the gash on her forehead, but her eyes were clearer now, focused with the intensity of someone who knows they might not get another chance to speak. "The summer before Michael was born," she began, her voice barely audible over the wind whistling through the rocks. "You remember how we were having problems? How we almost separated?" I remembered. It was 1990, and we'd been married 6 years. I was working 16-hour days trying to get the construction business off the ground, and Margaret felt like she was married to a ghost. We'd had terrible fights, the kind where you say things you can't take back, where you start wondering if you married the wrong person. "You moved in with your sister for 3 weeks, I said. "In Denver." "Yes." Margaret closed her eyes, and for a moment I thought she might have lost consciousness. But then she continued, "I was so lonely, Chester, so angry at you for choosing work over our marriage. And there was this man." My heart was breaking in ways I didn't know were possible. "Margaret, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." His name was David Kellerman. He was a lawyer, recently divorced, living in the same apartment complex as Sarah. He was kind to me when I felt like my world was falling apart. One thing led to another, and she trailed off, but I understood. During those 3 weeks when our marriage was hanging by a thread, my wife had an affair. When I found out I was pregnant, I honestly didn't know who the father was. The timing. It could have been either of you. When we reconciled and moved back in together, I convinced myself it was yours. I wanted it to be yours so badly that I made myself believe it. The mountain was spinning around me. 34 years of my life, rewriting themselves in an instant. Every birthday party, every little league game, every proud father moment, all of it built on a lie. "How long have you known for sure?" I asked. "I've suspected for years. Michael never looked quite like you, never had your mannerisms. But I told myself that children don't always resemble their parents." It was easier than facing the truth. Margaret struggled to shift her position, wincing as her broken ribs shifted. But last year, Michael started asking questions about his medical history. He and Jessica were trying to get pregnant, and the doctor wanted a complete family health background. When Michael asked about your side of the family's history with heart disease and diabetes, I panicked. So you told him, God, no. I couldn't, but Michael is smart, Chester. He started putting pieces together. He remembered things. How we'd separated, how I'd lived with Sarah, the timing of everything. And then, she paused, gathering strength. He had a DNA test done. One of those mail-in kits. He said he wanted to trace our family genealogy as a surprise for our anniversary. But what he really wanted was proof. The betrayal was multiplying, layer upon layer. Not just the attempted murder, but years of lies, years of wondering, years of doubt that had apparently poisoned my son against me. When did he confront you? About 8 months ago. He came to the house when you were at the Morrison job site. He was different, cold. He showed me the results on his phone. 0% probability that you were his biological father. I tried to imagine that conversation. Tried to picture the son I'd raised, looking at the woman who'd given birth to him, with that new, terrible knowledge. What did he say? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. He said he'd always felt like an outsider in his own family, like he was playing a role that didn't quite fit. He said it explained why he'd never felt the connection to you that other sons had with their fathers. That hit me like another fall. Because the truth was, I'd noticed the distance too. I'd attributed it to generational differences, to Michael being more ambitious and sophisticated than his old man. But maybe it had been something deeper. Maybe some part of him had always known. He asked me who his real father was. When I told him about David Kellerman, he went completely silent. Just sat there staring at me for the longest time. Then he said, "Does Dad know?" When I told him no, he said, "Good, let's keep it that way." But why? Why wouldn't he want me to know? Margaret's laugh was bitter, broken. Because David Kellerman is dead, Chester. He died in a car accident 15 years ago. But before he died, he became very, very wealthy. The pieces were clicking into place with horrible clarity. The inheritance. David never married again after his divorce, never had any other children that anyone knew of. When he died, his estate, worth about $12 million, went into a trust. The trust was set up to pay out to any biological children he might have. I stared at my wife, the woman I'd loved for over 3 decades, the woman who just revealed that our entire marriage was built on deception. Michael stands to inherit $12 million if he can prove David Kellerman was his father. But there's a problem, Margaret continued. The trust has a clause. If the potential heir is married, their spouse automatically becomes a co-beneficiary. Jessica would get half of everything. So what's the problem with that? The problem is us, Chester. As long as we're alive, Michael is still legally your son in every way that matters. He has your name, you're on his birth certificate, you raised him. If he tries to claim the Kellerman inheritance, there would be questions, investigations, DNA tests. And if it came out that I'd committed paternity fraud, the full horror of the situation was becoming clear. You could be charged with a crime, worse than that. If the court determined that I'd deliberately deceived you about Michael's parentage, you might be able to claim damages. Sue for emotional distress, financial support you provided under false pretenses. It could tie up the inheritance for years, maybe decades. I was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. My body was broken, lying on a mountain ledge after my son had tried to murder me. And now I was learning that he wasn't even my son, that my wife had been lying to me for 34 years, that the boy I'd taught to fish and helped with homework and walked down the aisle at his wedding had seen me as an obstacle to his real inheritance. So they decided to kill us, I said finally. Make it look like an accident. Michael inherits everything we have, plus he can claim the Kellerman money without any complications. That's what I think, yes. With us dead, there's no one left who knows the truth. Michael can take his DNA results to the trust administrators, claim his inheritance, and live happily ever after with Jessica and their baby. The baby. In all of this horror, I'd almost forgotten about the pregnancy announcement. Do you think Jessica is really pregnant? Margaret was quiet for so long, I thought she might have passed out. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, harder. Chester, there's more. Something I discovered just last week, right before they brought us up here. More. Margaret, I don't think I can handle any more revelations. This one you need to hear. Because it changes everything about what just happened to us. She struggled to turn her head to look at me directly. Blood had dried in her silver hair, and her left eye was swollen nearly shut, but there was a fierce determination in her expression. I hired a private investigator. You what? After Michael confronted me about the DNA test, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. Call it mother's intuition, but his reaction was too calculated, too cold. So I hired someone to look into Jessica's background. This was a side of Margaret I'd never seen. In 32 years of marriage, she'd never been secretive or suspicious. She was the most trusting person I'd ever known, sometimes to a fault. What did you find out? Jessica isn't who she says she is, Chester. Her real name is Jennifer Walsh, and she's from Grand Junction, not Denver. Her family doesn't have old Colorado money. Her father was a mechanic who died when she was 16, and her mother cleaned houses to make ends meet. I stared at her. That's impossible. I've met her parents at the wedding. Richard and Patricia Morrison. Actors, Margaret said grimly. The private investigator tracked them down. They're a couple from Los Angeles who specialize in playing roles for wealthy clients who need fake family histories for various reasons. My head was reeling. Nothing was real. Nothing was what it seemed. But why? Why would Jessica create an entire fake identity? Because Jennifer Walsh has a criminal record. Identity theft, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. The mountain went completely silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Murder? Her first husband died in a hiking accident in Utah 3 years ago. Fell off a cliff during what was supposed to be a romantic anniversary trip. Jennifer inherited his life insurance policy and a small trust fund. The investigators suspected foul play, but they could never prove it. I felt like I was drowning in revelations. She's done this before, and it gets worse. The private investigator found evidence that she's been researching our finances, our property values, our insurance policies. She's been planning this for months, maybe since before she even married Michael. Does Michael know about her real identity? Margaret's expression grew even darker. That's what I was trying to figure out when they invited us on this little family outing. I think Michael believes he's using her to get access to the Kellerman money. But the truth is, she's using him. And once she has what she wants, she didn't need to finish the sentence. If Jessica had killed one husband for money, she wouldn't hesitate to kill another. We have to warn him, I said instinctively, then immediately felt foolish. The man had just tried to murder us. Why should I care what happened to him? Chester, Michael made his choice. He chose money over family, greed over love. He pushed his own parents off a cliff. If Jessica destroys him, maybe that's justice. But I couldn't let go of 34 years that easily. Fake son or not, I'd raised that boy. I'd loved him, supported him, been proud of him. The thought of him being manipulated and eventually murdered by that cold, calculating woman made me sick. We have to get off this mountain, I said. We have to survive this and stop her. Margaret tried to sit up and immediately collapsed back down with a cry of pain. Chester, I think my ribs are broken. Maybe my spine too. I can barely move. I tested my own body carefully. Pain shot through my left leg when I tried to shift it, and my head felt like it had been split open, but my arms seemed to work. I might be able to move. Can you feel your legs? Yes, but barely. And there's so much pain. I looked around our rocky prison. We were on a narrow ledge, about 30 feet down from where Michael and Jessica had pushed us. Above, the cliff face was nearly vertical. Below, it dropped at least another 100 feet to a boulder-strewn canyon floor. But to our right, maybe 20 feet away, I could see what looked like a gentler slope. If I could get us to that point, maybe we could work our way down slowly, carefully. Margaret, I'm going to try to move you. It's going to hurt, but we can't stay here. When they realize we're not dead, they'll come back to finish the job. She completed the thought. I began the agonizing process of dragging myself across the ledge toward my wife. Every movement sent lightning bolts of pain through my battered body. But the thought of Jessica's cold eyes and calculating smile kept me moving. When I reached Margaret, I could see just how badly hurt she really was. Her left arm hung at an unnatural angle, definitely broken. Blood had soaked through her jacket from what looked like several deep cuts. Her breathing was shallow and labored, but she was alive and she was conscious, and right now that had to be enough. I'm going to try to get us to that slope, I told her. It's going to hurt like hell. Do it, she said through gritted teeth. I'd rather die trying to escape than lie here waiting for them to come back. I positioned myself behind her and began pulling her across the rocky ledge. Her screams of pain cut through me like knives, but I kept going. 20 feet had never seemed so far. When we finally reached the more gradual slope, we were both sobbing from pain and exhaustion. But we were moving in the right direction, down and away from the cliff where our would-be killers had left us for dead. "Chester," Margaret gasped as we paused to rest. "There's something else. About the private investigator's report. What now? Jessica isn't just after our money and the Kellerman inheritance. She's been researching other families in the area. Wealthy elderly couples with valuable property and grown children who might benefit from their parents' deaths. The implications hit me like a physical blow. She's planning to do this again, and again and again. We're not her victims, Chester. We're her prototype. If she succeeds with us, Michael will help her do it to other families. They're not just murderers. They're starting a business." As we slowly, painfully made our way down the mountain, bleeding and broken but alive, I realized that escaping was only the beginning. We weren't just fighting for our own lives now. We were the only thing standing between Jessica Morrison or Jennifer Walsh, or whatever her real name was, and a string of elderly victims who had no idea what was coming for them. The fall had nearly killed us. But what we'd learned on that mountain ledge had given us a reason to live, stopping them before they could do this. It took us nearly 4 hours to make our way down what should have been a 30-minute hike. Every step was agony, every pause a risk that we might not find the strength to continue. But the alternative, lying on that ledge waiting to die or for Jessica to return, kept us moving. Margaret's condition was deteriorating. Her breathing had become more labored, and she was drifting in and out of consciousness. I was terrified that she had internal bleeding, a punctured lung, or worse. But she insisted we keep going. "Can't stop," she whispered during one of our rest breaks. "Other families in danger." By the time we reached the bottom of the canyon, the sun was beginning to set, painting the Colorado sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Any other day, Margaret would have insisted on taking pictures. Today, she could barely lift her head. We were still miles from the main road, miles from help. But at least we were off the mountain, and in terrain I recognized. This was part of the old mining area, full of abandoned claims and forgotten trails. If I could find one of the old mining roads, it might lead us to civilization. "Chester," Margaret said weakly, as I helped her lean against a large boulder. "I need to tell you something else. About the private investigator's report. Margaret, save your strength. We can talk when we get to safety. No, this is important. If something happens to me..." She reached into her jacket pocket with her good arm and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a flash drive. "Everything is on here. All the evidence about Jessica's real identity, her criminal record, the fake parents, the Utah murder, and something else. I took the flash drive, my hands shaking. What else? The investigator found bank records. Jessica has been receiving payments for the past 2 years. Large payments from an offshore account. Payments for what? Margaret's eyes were getting glassy, but she forced herself to focus. We think she's not working alone, Chester. Someone has been paying her to target specific families. Wealthy couples with assets that can be easily transferred to children or spouses. The horror kept expanding. She's a contract killer. And Michael, God help me, I think he's become her partner. The investigator traced some of the money. It's been flowing into accounts that Michael opened 6 months ago. I felt like I was going to be sick. Not only had my son tried to murder us, but he was part of a larger conspiracy to systematically kill elderly couples for their money. How many families? We're not sure, but the investigator found at least 3 other cases in Colorado and Wyoming over the past 2 years. Elderly couples who died in accidents while hiking or camping with their adult children or in-laws. In each case, the heirs received substantial inheritances shortly after the deaths. I stared at the flash drive in my hand. This small piece of plastic contained evidence of multiple murders. If we could get it to the authorities... Margaret, who else knows about this? The private investigator. Her face crumpled. He's dead, Chester. Car accident 3 days ago. The same day Jessica and Michael invited us for this family outing. Of course. No loose ends, no witnesses. Jessica was thorough, I had to give her that. But he sent me copies of everything before he died. That flash drive contains everything he discovered. It's our only proof. A sound echoed through the canyon, the distant roar of an engine. My blood turned to ice. They were coming back. They probably went to the real Eagle Point first, I whispered, helping Margaret to her feet. To establish their alibi, be seen by other visitors. But when they don't find our bodies in the morning news, they'll come back to make sure we're really dead. The engine noise was getting closer. Through the trees, I could see headlight beams sweeping back and forth as a vehicle navigated the rough mountain roads. We stumbled deeper into the forest, Margaret leaning heavily on my arm. Every step sent shockwaves of pain through my injured leg, but adrenaline kept me moving. Behind us, the engine noise stopped. "Dad! Mom!" Michael's voice echoed through the canyon, artificially cheerful. "Are you out there? We came back to check on you." Jessica's voice joined his. "We got worried when you didn't come down to meet us at the parking area." They were playing their parts perfectly. Concerned family members looking for missing relatives. If anyone else was around to hear, it would sound completely innocent. We pressed deeper into the trees, trying to put distance between us and their voices. But Margaret was slowing down, her strength finally giving out. "Chester, I need to rest." We were in a small clearing, surrounded by dense pine forest. In the fading light, I could barely make out an old mining structure, probably the remains of a shaft house from the 1890s. It wasn't much shelter, but it was better than being exposed in the open. I helped Margaret into the ruins, and we collapsed against a crumbling stone wall. The voices were getting closer. "I think they went this way," Jessica was saying. "Look, there are drag marks in the dirt." Drag marks? Of course there would be. I'd been pulling Margaret across rough ground for hours. We might as well have left them a map. Jesus Christ. Michael's voice was different now, lower, more urgent. "How the hell did they survive that fall?" "Shut up," Jessica hissed. "Someone might hear you. There's no one else out here. You said this place was completely isolated. Just because I haven't seen anyone doesn't mean we're alone. We need to find them and finish this quietly." I peered through a gap in the stone wall. Flashlight beams were dancing through the trees, getting closer. They were maybe 50 yards away and moving in our direction. Margaret was unconscious again, her breathing shallow and raspy. Even if I could move her, we'd never stay ahead of them. They were healthy, uninjured, and they had flashlights. We were broken, exhausted, and running out of time, but maybe I didn't need to outrun them. Maybe I just needed to outlast them. I pulled out my cell phone, praying for a signal. Nothing. We were too deep in the mountains, too far from any cell tower. The flashlight beams were closer now, maybe 30 yards. I could hear them talking in low, urgent voices. "The blood trail goes this way," Jessica was saying. "They can't have gone far. That old woman looked half dead already. What if someone finds the bodies before we can clean this up?" Michael sounded scared now, the reality of what they'd done sinking in. "Then we stick to the story. We dropped them off for sightseeing and left. When they didn't come home, we got worried and came back to look for them. We're devastated by the tragic accident, but if they're not dead, they will be. Even if they survived the fall, they won't survive exposure overnight, or blood loss, or any number of things that can happen to injured people in the mountains." They were 20 yards away now, close enough that I could see their silhouettes moving between the trees. Michael was carrying what looked like a tire iron. Jessica had something in her hand that might have been a knife. They weren't planning to make this look like an accident anymore. They were coming to finish the job, and they didn't care how messy it got. I looked down at Margaret's unconscious form and made a decision. I couldn't save both of us, but maybe I could save one of us. Maybe I could buy her enough time for help to arrive, or for her to regain consciousness and escape. I kissed her forehead gently, tucked the flash drive into her jacket pocket, and stood up. My injured leg nearly buckled under my weight, but I forced myself to walk out of the ruins and into the clearing. If they were going to find us anyway, I'd rather face them on my terms. "Michael," I called out, my voice carrying through the still mountain air. "I'm right here, son." The flashlight beams swung toward me immediately, blinding me temporarily. But I could see their shapes approaching, Michael tall and hesitant, Jessica smaller but moving with predatory confidence. "Dad?" Michael sounded genuinely shocked. "How are you? We thought you were dead," I finished for him. "Sorry to disappoint you." They were close enough now that I could see their faces in the reflected flashlight glow. Michael looked horrified. Whether at my survival or at what he'd done, I couldn't tell. Jessica just looked annoyed, like I was a problem that needed solving. "Where's Margaret?" Jessica asked. No pretense now, no fake concern. Just cold, business-like efficiency. "Safe," I lied. "Far from here." Michael stepped closer, and I could see the tire iron in his hands. "Dad, God, I'm so sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen like this." "What was it supposed to happen like, Michael? Were we supposed to die more quietly? More conveniently?" He flinched at my words. "I never wanted to hurt you, either of you. But the money, the inheritance, it changes everything, does it? Does $12 million really change who you are so completely that you can murder the people who raised you?" "You didn't raise me." The words exploded out of him with decades of buried resentment. "You raised someone else's son. You loved someone else's child. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time you said you were proud of me, it was all based on a lie." The pain in his voice was real, and for a moment I saw not the man who'd tried to kill me, but the confused, hurt boy who'd learned that his entire life was built on deception. "Michael, you're right. You're not my biological son, but you're still the boy I taught to ride a bike. You're still the young man I walked down the aisle at your wedding. DNA doesn't make a family. Love does. And I loved you." "Loved?" His voice cracked. "Past tense?" I'd looked at this person I'd raised, holding a weapon and standing with a woman who'd already killed at least one person. "I don't know, son. I honestly don't know anymore." Jessica stepped forward impatiently. "This is very touching, really, but we need to wrap this up. Michael, he's injured and alone. Just finish it." But Michael was staring at me, and I could see something shifting in his expression. Doubt? Regret? Or maybe just the realization of what he'd become. "She's using you," I said quietly. "Jessica, or Jennifer, or whatever her real name is. She's done this before, Michael. She killed her first husband the same way." Michael's head snapped toward Jessica. "What's he talking about?" "He's trying to turn you against me," Jessica said smoothly. "He's desperate. He'll say anything. Her real name is Jennifer Walsh, I continued. She's from Grand Junction, not Denver. Her parents aren't wealthy socialites. They're dead. The people at your wedding were actors she hired. I could see the doubt creeping into Michael's face. That's impossible. She's killed before, son, and she's being paid to kill elderly couples. You're not her partner. You're her tool. And when she's done using you, Jessica's mask finally slipped completely. Enough. The knife in her hand wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was a very real, very sharp reality. She moved toward me with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this before, but Michael stepped between us. "Wait," he said, his voice uncertain. "Jessica, is any of this true?" "Of course not." "He's lying to save his own life. Can't you see that? Then prove it. Show me your real ID. Call your parents. Let me talk to them." Jessica's eyes went cold. "Michael, we don't have time for this. He's seen our faces. He knows what we did. We have to finish this now." "My God," Michael whispered, staring at her. "It is true, isn't it? You really are." Jessica moved faster than I would have thought possible. The knife flashed in the moonlight as she spun toward Michael, but he was younger and quicker. He caught her wrist, and they struggled for control of the weapon. "Run, Dad!" Michael shouted as they fought. "Get out of here!" I wanted to help him, but I could barely stand, and Margaret was still unconscious in the ruins, still in danger. I had to make a choice. Try to help Michael fight a trained killer, or protect my wife and get the evidence to safety. I chose Margaret. I limped back into the ruins as fast as my injured leg would allow, scooped Margaret into my arms, and stumbled deeper into the forest. Behind me, I could hear sounds of struggle, grunts, impacts, something heavy hitting the ground, then silence. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. I had to focus on getting Margaret and the flash drive to safety. Whatever had happened in that clearing, whatever choice Michael had made, it was too late to change it now. We crashed through the underbrush, Margaret a dead weight in my arms, my strength failing with every step. But ahead of us I could see lights through the trees. Not flashlights, steady artificial light, a building, civilization, help. I stumbled out of the forest onto a paved road, my legs finally giving out. Margaret and I collapsed onto the asphalt, but we were alive. We were together, and we had the evidence. The lights belonged to a small gas station and convenience store, one of those places that serves the few hardy souls who live this far up in the mountains. Through the windows, I could see an elderly man behind the counter reading a newspaper. I dragged myself and Margaret toward the door, leaving a trail of blood on the pavement. Every muscle in my body was screaming in protest, but we were so close now. The bell above the door chimed as I pushed it open. The man behind the counter looked up, took one look at us, and immediately reached for his phone. "Jesus Christ, what happened to you folks?" "Call 911, I gasped, collapsing onto the floor with Margaret still in my arms. "And call the FBI. We have evidence of multiple murders." The man was already dialing, speaking rapidly to the emergency dispatcher. But I could barely hear him. The adrenaline that had kept me going was fading, and darkness was creeping in around the edges of my vision. The last thing I remembered was the sound of sirens in the distance, getting closer. We'd made it. We'd survived. But as I lost consciousness, one thought haunted me. I didn't know if Michael was alive or dead, hero or villain. I didn't know if Jessica had won or lost. And I didn't know how many other families were out there, unsuspecting, with targets on their backs. The nightmare was far from over. In many ways it was just beginning. I woke up in Denver General Hospital 48 hours later to the sound of machines beeping and the smell of antiseptic. My left leg was in a cast, my head wrapped in bandages, and every breath felt like fire in my chest. But I was alive, Chester. Margaret's voice, weak but unmistakably hers. I turned my head, a mistake that sent lightning through my skull, and saw her in the bed next to mine. Her left arm was in a sling, her face a patchwork of cuts and bruises, but her eyes were clear and focused. "How long?" I croaked. "2 days. You've been unconscious since they brought us in. 3 broken ribs, concussion, fractured leg, and enough cuts to make you look like a road map." Her voice was stronger than I expected. "But we're alive, Chester. We made it." Before I could respond, the door opened and 2 people in dark suits walked in. FBI agents, from the look of them. A tall black woman with sharp eyes and a compact Hispanic man with premature gray hair. "Mr. and Mrs. Edwards, I'm Agent Sarah Chen, and this is Agent Rodriguez. We need to talk to you about what happened on that mountain." Agent Chen pulled up a chair beside my bed, while Rodriguez positioned himself near the door. "Professional courtesy or making sure no one could leave?" "I couldn't tell. The flash drive you gave us," Chen continued. "It's opened up the biggest serial killing investigation Colorado has seen in 20 years. My heart stopped. "Serial killing? How many?" Rodriguez consulted his tablet. 7 confirmed cases over the past 3 years. All elderly couples with substantial assets. All died in hiking or camping accidents, while with their adult children or in-laws. In every case, the heirs inherited everything within months. "Jesus," Margaret whispered. "The pattern was almost perfect," Chen said. "Different locations, different methods, but always the same result. Wealthy older couples die in accidents, younger relatives inherit fortunes. What about Michael?" "I had to know. The young man who was with Jessica." "Is he?" The agents exchanged a look. "That's complicated, Mr. Edwards. We found blood at the scene where you last saw them." "A lot of blood, and signs of a struggle." My heart sank. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the attempted murder, I'd raised that boy for 34 years. The thought that he might have died trying to save me, but we didn't find a body, Rodriguez continued. "Either of them? What does that mean?" "It means Jessica Morrison, or Jennifer Walsh as we now know her, is still out there. And so is your son." Margaret struggled to sit up straighter. "Are they together? Is Michael helping her?" "We don't know. But Mr. Edwards, there's something else. Something we discovered when we started digging into this network." Chen leaned forward. "Jessica isn't the mastermind behind this operation. She's just one of several people doing this across multiple states. We've identified similar cases in Utah, Wyoming, Montana, and New Mexico, all following the same pattern. The rooms seem to tilt." "How many people are involved?" "At least 12 that we've identified so far. All young women, all with criminal backgrounds, all using fake identities. They target elderly couples, seduce or marry into families, then eliminate the obstacles to inheritance." Rodriguez pulled up something on his tablet. "But here's the thing. They're all being coordinated by someone. Someone with access to financial records, property assessments, family information. Someone who can identify the perfect targets and match them with the perfect killers. Who? We're still working on that. But Mr. Edwards, the evidence on that flash drive didn't just expose Jessica. It exposed the entire network. Bank records, communication logs, target lists." Margaret grabbed my hand. "Target lists." Chen nodded grimly. 47 families across the Mountain West region. Wealthy elderly couples with children or relatives who could inherit substantial amounts. Your family was just one name on a very long list. The magnitude of what we'd stumbled into was overwhelming. We hadn't just survived our own murder attempt. We'd uncovered a vast conspiracy to systematically eliminate elderly wealthy couples across multiple states. "The other families," I said urgently. "Do they know? Are they being warned?" "We're in the process of contacting them now, but it's complicated. Some of the potential killers are already embedded in the families. Beloved daughters-in-law, trusted sons-in-law, even adopted children. We have to be careful about how we approach this." Rodriguez leaned against the wall. "The thing is, Mr. Edwards, we need your help. You're the only surviving victims who can positively identify how this operation works from the inside." "What kind of help?" "We want to set a trap, use you as bait to draw Jessica back." Margaret's grip on my hand tightened. Absolutely not. Haven't we been through enough? Mrs. Edwards, I understand your concerns, but Jessica knows you survived. She knows you have evidence. She's not going to just disappear and hope for the best. She's going to come after you. Chen pulled out a photograph, a security camera image of a woman in a baseball cap and sunglasses at what looked like a gas station. This was taken yesterday morning in Grand Junction, 30 miles from here. She's close, and she's watching. My blood went cold. How do you know it's her? The woman paid cash, avoided looking directly at the cameras, and when she left, she got into a vehicle that was reported stolen in Denver 2 days ago. Plus, facial recognition software gives us an 87% match despite the disguise. Margaret was studying the photo. She looks different, thinner, desperate. Desperate people do desperate things, Rodriguez said, which is why we need to end this before she makes another move. What kind of trap? I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. Chen reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder. We want to stage your release from the hospital. Make it look like you're going home, recovering from your injuries. But you'll actually be in a safe house with full surveillance and protection, and Jessica will try to finish what she started. That's what we're counting on. When she makes her move, we'll be ready. Margaret was shaking her head. It's too dangerous. What if something goes wrong? Something is already wrong, Mrs. Edwards. This woman has killed at least 14 people that we know of. She's not going to stop because you survived. She's going to escalate. Rodriguez stepped forward. There's something else. The communication logs from the flash drive show that Jessica received new orders yesterday. Orders to clean up the loose ends in Colorado and move to a new target in Wyoming. New orders from whom? We're working on that. But the point is, she's not done here. She won't leave until you're both dead, and the evidence is destroyed. I looked at Margaret, saw the fear and determination warring in her eyes. We'd come this far. We'd survived the fall, the mountain, the revelation of everything we thought we knew being a lie. Could we risk it all again to stop a killer? If we do this, I said slowly, what guarantee do we have that you can protect us? None, Chen said bluntly. But Mr. Edwards, if you don't do this, she'll come after you anyway. At least this way, we'll be ready for her. The room was quiet, except for the beeping of monitors and the distant sounds of hospital activity. Margaret and I stared at each other, communicating without words the way couples do after 32 years of marriage. Chester, she said finally, those other families on the list. They have no idea what's coming for them. I nodded. She was right. We couldn't run from this. We'd been chosen as victims, but now we had the chance to be something else. We could be the ones who stopped Jessica and her network before they destroyed more families. Okay, I said to the agents. We'll do it. But I have conditions. Chen raised an eyebrow. What kind of conditions? I want to know what happened to Michael. Real information, not speculation. And if he's alive, if he's being held against his will, you save him too. Mr. Edwards, given what he did to you, he's not my biological son, but I raised him. And in that clearing he tried to save me. That has to count for something. Rodriguez consulted his tablet again. We can't make promises about Michael's fate, but we'll share what we know as we learn it. And the other families on the list? They'll be protected. We're coordinating with local law enforcement in 5 states. I looked at Margaret one more time. She nodded slightly. Then let's catch this bitch. Chen smiled for the first time since entering the room. Good. We'll start making preparations immediately. But, Mr. Edwards, there's one more thing you should know. What? The blood at the scene where you last saw Michael and Jessica? We ran DNA tests. Some of it was hers, Margaret gasped. Jessica was injured, more than injured. Based on the amount of blood and the spatter patterns, she was seriously hurt, possibly dying, so maybe she's not as dangerous as we thought. Rodriguez shook his head. Actually, that makes her more dangerous. A wounded predator is the most unpredictable kind. She has nothing left to lose, As if summoned by his words, my phone, which had somehow survived the ordeal and was sitting on my bedside table, started ringing. Chen motioned for me to answer it, while Rodriguez pulled out recording equipment. "Hello?" Silence for a moment, then a voice I recognized but had never heard sound so cold, so devoid of humanity. "Hello, Chester." "Jessica. I thought you were dead," I said, trying to keep my voice steady while the FBI agents frantically set up their equipment. "Not quite, though your son certainly tried his best to kill me." "Where is he?" "Where's Michael?" A laugh like breaking glass. "That's a very interesting question. Would you like to see him again?" My heart was pounding. "Is he alive?" "For now, but that depends entirely on you, Chester. You and Margaret have something that belongs to me." "What are you talking about?" "Don't play stupid. The flash drive, the evidence, all those files that could destroy everything I've worked for." I looked at Agent Chen, who was nodding encouragingly while adjusting headphones. "I gave it to the FBI. It's gone, Jessica. It's over." "No, Chester, it's not over until I say it's over. And right now, I have something you want, and you have something I want. A trade? Smart man. Meet me tonight, midnight, at the place where this all started." "What place?" "The ledge where you should have died, Chester. Come alone. Both of you. And bring copies of everything on that flash drive. The FBI will never... The FBI doesn't have Michael hanging over a 300-foot drop with a rope around his neck. But I do." The line went dead. Agent Chen was already on her radio, barking orders to teams I couldn't see. Rodriguez was typing furiously on his tablet. "She wants us to meet her at the cliff," I told them unnecessarily, "with copies of the evidence. At midnight. It's obviously a trap," Margaret said. "Of course it's a trap. But if Michael is really alive..." Chen finished setting up her equipment. "Mr. Edwards, we can't let you walk into an obvious ambush. You said you wanted to set a trap." "Well, she just set one for us. Same principle, right?" Rodriguez looked up from his tablet. "The location she mentioned. We can have teams in position hours before the meeting. Night vision, long-range surveillance, the works. And if she really has Michael, if she kills him when she sees your teams, then she kills him whether we're there or not," Chen said pragmatically. "At least this way we have a chance to save him and capture her." Margaret struggled to sit up fully. "I'm going." "Margaret, you can barely walk. Neither can you. But that boy, biological or not, he's our son, Chester. If there's even a chance he's alive, we have to try." I knew that tone. Margaret had made up her mind, and nothing I could say would change it. "Agent Chen, what do you need from us?" "Complete cooperation. You do exactly what we say when we say it. No heroics, no improvisation. This is a federal operation now." "Understood." Rodriguez was still typing. "We'll have teams moving into position by 6 p.m. Full surveillance, snipers, tactical units. If Jessica so much as breathes wrong, we'll have her. And if Michael is really there, if she really has him..." Chen's expression was grim. "Then we save who we can and hope for the best." As the agents left to make preparations, Margaret and I sat in silence, contemplating what we were about to do. Return to the place where our son had tried to murder us, to face a wounded killer who had nothing left to lose. But somewhere on that mountain, Michael might be alive. He might be paying for his moment of conscience with his life. And despite everything he'd done, despite all the lies and betrayal, I couldn't abandon him. Not when he'd tried to save me in the end. The sun was setting outside our hospital window, painting the sky the same brilliant orange we'd admired just 3 days ago on what was supposed to be a simple family outing. Tonight, we'd find out if our family could be saved, or if Jessica's web of murder and deceit would claim its final victims. Either way, it would end where it began, on the edge of a cliff with everything we loved hanging